Before we start, I'm going to put a couple of characters up on the screen. And I want you to shout out whether you think that character is good, or whether you think that character is bad.
Bad.
Good! You said
Good.
okay, what about him?
Bad.
Last one.
Good.
That's interesting. It may seem obvious, but our brains have been trained from a young age to recognize good and bad, and heroes and villains. The hero does the right thing and saves the day, while the villain causes harm, breaks the rules, and spreads chaos. However, the concepts of good and evil aren't as simple as they seem, and the way stories define them isn't as clear as we think. Think back to the stories we've all heard as kids. Whether that be a fairy tale, a cartoon, or a picture book, they all have similar structures. The hero is brave, kind, and selfless, and the villain is greedy, cruel, and has little to no redemptive qualities. In the end, good prevails, and evil is punished. As a kid, Spider-Man was my favorite superhero growing up, and a role model who taught me many valuable lessons, like with great power comes great responsibility. These classic stories are simple and satisfying, but the real world is not that simple. Good people do terrible things, and bad people do good things. Despite knowing this, we still often cling to this idea that morality is black and white. And we do this because that's how we were taught. But that is not true. A character that made me struggle with this black and white concept of morality was Walter White. How many of you here have seen Breaking Bad? Okay, that's more than I expected. For those of you who haven't seen Breaking Bad, it follows Walter White, a high school chemistry teacher diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. After he learns about his diagnosis, he decides to use his knowledge of chemistry to produce and sell drugs to leave behind money for his family when he dies. However, Walter White lies, kills, and manipulates everyone around him, transforming himself from a desperate man simply trying to provide for his family to a ruthless, power-hungry drug kingpin. The way Breaking Bad tells the story idolizes and glamorizes Walter White and the terrible things he does. I found it hard to see past just good or bad. I had to label Walter as only one of them, and in my mind, he was good. This showed me just how powerful storytelling is. Breaking Bad twisted my sense of morality. It made me think that just because I had a good enough reason, doing the wrong thing is okay. This showed me for the first time that stories aren't just pure entertainment, but that they can influence our thoughts and beliefs. When I say stories, that doesn't necessarily mean fiction. The news we hear every day, history we learn about in school, and the YouTube videos and TikToks we watch are all examples of a story. And the black and white concepts of morality are present in these too. In history, real-world people were initially framed as just good or bad, and our perception of them has now changed over time. For example, Christopher Columbus was initially praised for his discovery of new lands, but is now heavily criticized for his initiation of so much colonial violence. Another example would be Nelson Mandela. Someone who was initially labeled as a terrorist and put in jail is now recognized across the world as a symbol of peace. The way we tell these stories, whether fictional or real, shape our real-world views on history, justice, and politics. For example, different news outlets present information in different ways. One news outlet might lean more progressive, while the other news outlet might lean more conservative. Because of these varying perspectives, we could believe that one policy is just good or just bad, depending on the information we consume. So, the big question after all of this is, how do we stop ourselves from seeing the world in black and white, and how do we stop ourselves from being manipulated and influenced? Well, firstly, we have to understand that real life isn't a story, and we can't oversimplify people to just good or bad. Stories need to be complex, because life is complex. When we are introduced to morally gray and complex characters, we are taught to understand different perspectives and challenge our initial thoughts and assumptions. When we learn about the motivations of characters in fictional stories, we question why people in our life act the way they do, and learn to understand and appreciate each other more. Second, We have to ask ourselves, who is telling the story and why are they telling the story? A large majority of stories, whether fictional or real, have a bias and try to tell you what to think. Whether this be a book, a movie, or the news, every story is framed in a certain way, and we have to question the perspective we are given. I want you to reevaluate the characters I showed you on in the beginning of this talk. Are these characters just good or bad, or is it all a matter of understanding their perspective and the story the author intended to tell? Although I focus a lot of this talk on how stories can negatively impact us, it's not all bad. Think back to what I said about how stories have positively impacted my life, with the role models provided for me in Spider-Man and the countless memories I've made watching movies with friends and family. Stories are our best teachers when it comes to morality. Once we break free from the oversimplifying narratives of storytelling, they teach us to look past words as simple as good and evil and start to understand each other and the world more clearly. Thank you.